This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Just begging to course its way through your veins.
Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You're into comic books, aren't you?
I'm a nerd.
But you do like comic books.
Comic books aren't just for sad nerds anymore.
Do you think we need one more?
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Do you think we need one more?
Objection, calls for speculation, move to strike.
This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
All right, we'll get one more.
Spec Tales, a comic book podcast with Jake and Jesus.
What is going on, spectators? This is Chris Hacker, or Jake, for this episode. You were joining us for the Secret Invasion, the three-part series from some of Jake and Jesus' best friends in the comic book comic book podcasting world. And joining me this week, the man who I once described as frustratingly affable, one of my good friends in the podcasting world, Badr Milligan from the Short Box podcast. Welcome, Badr, to the Spec Tales.
Yo, Chris, you got me. I'm a little off balance. For starters, that intro music makes me feel like I'm in a dirty, dark club, and Batman is going to show up any minute and punch somebody in the face. Hopefully, not me. And then secondly, I got to look up that word that you just described me. I wanted to be like, what you call me, Chris?
Affable means extremely likable.
Oh, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. That's me right there.
Likable to the point where it's like infuriating.
There we go. All right, I'll take that. What up, Chris? What up, spectators?
Yeah, that's right. Well, so before we get into our guest here, who is waiting ever so patiently in the green room, as they used to say back on MTV. As we said, I am Chris Hacker. I'm the co-host of the Oblivion Bar, a nerd culture podcast. Since April of 2020, my co-host Aaron and I have been covering all things movies, comic books, television, video games each week. Again, we're into like our 3.5 years, and it's been awesome. We interview creators, we do countdowns, we partner with other podcasts for all types of nerdy things. So if you enjoy what Jake and Jesus do here on the Spec Tales, please consider checking out the Oblivion Bar. I feel weird shamelessly plugging the Oblivion Bar, even though Jake begged me to do it here in this little segment. But I would love to pass the baton off to Badr because he has been doing some incredible work over at the Short Box for far longer than I've been doing the Oblivion Bar with Aaron.
Oh, no, Chris, you give me too much props. I just have no damn sense. It's taken me 10 years to get to this point, and what you guys were able to do in like 3 years. You guys are absolutely crushing it. For anyone that's unfamiliar, my name is Badr Milligan, and I host the Short Box podcast, aka the Short Box, a comic book talk show. And like Chris hinted at, for the last probably 11 years now, I guess going on 11 years, since 2012 is what I'll say, the Short Box has been entertaining listeners around the world with great conversations about comic books and pop culture topics. We've interviewed some of the best comic creators in the industry, picked their brains, and done our fair share of comic reviews. And you can catch new episodes of our show on Wednesday. I invite you to come join the Short Box Nation. But today, man, we're playing the role of Jake and Jesus today. We got to earn the trust and respect of these spectators. I'm sorry, man. Just them calling their fan base spectators is so awesome because it makes.
I'm wearing my spectator shirt right now, actually.
You know what? Because I remember seeing that their logo, their mascot, for the first time. And thinking, how does this tie into it? But now I'm sitting. Now I get to sit in the chair, and I'm getting to experience it all. I'm thirsty for some tater tots and ketchup right now. But yeah, man, we get to do a takeover. It's been a while since I think I've maybe done one other podcast takeover, but never on an established podcast like the Spec Tales. I've been on some grimy podcasts. But
I've never done one myself personally. This is the first time. I was so happy when Jake asked us to do this, and he reached out to me and said, "Who would you want to bring on as your co-host?" Yeah. And Badr, again, I'm going to keep buttering you up here. You were my first instance. You were the first person I thought, why not bring on the man, the myth, the legend to join me on the Spec Tales? And speaking of myths and legends, we've got. I think it's finally time to bring in our legendary third co-host.
Let's do it, Chris.
Yeah, we've got to bring in the 3-time Eisner winner. He is the creative genius behind Odyssey with Matt Fraction. He did Invisible Kingdom with G. Willow Wilson. Black Bolt. Exactly. Black Bolt actually over at Marvel was my first kind of entryway into his career. And then more recently, he's worked on Bloodstained Teeth with Patrick Reynolds. So joining us here on Spec Tales is the also frustratingly affable Christian Ward.
Hello. No. I can't take this.
There's no stopping it. There's 2 seconds left.
Too much.
Hey, hold on, I got something on my end too. We'll have to send these to Jake in post.
A second round of applause.
No, thank
He
you.
deserves it.
Unseen.
He deserves everybody.
Thank you.
Unheard
Thank you. Oh, bless you both. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Very thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, Christian, we'd love for you to take a moment to kind of talk about your career and just kind of, I'm sure people are already familiar with your work, but just, tell the people a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Christian Ward, but I will be adding genius in front of that from now on. So
that's correct.
Christian Genius Ward, maybe something like that. I'll play around with it. So yeah, I'm Christian Ward. I'm primarily known as an artist. I've been doing comics now for about 14 years. Just bear with me a little bit. My 2-year-olds just walked in. Hang on, Bubba.
That's some real.
They want to get on the
man.
pod.
I like it. I love
That's
it.
some real dad stuff right there.
100%. Hey, Chris, did we and maybe Jay can cut? No, don't worry about it.
And I'm a dad. Sorry, man. I'm mostly known as a comic book artist, and I've been working for about 13, 14 years. Did a book called Olympus Image, which I don't talk about because it's rubbish. And then I did another book. Don't buy it. I don't want you to buy it. Don't. No, it's awful.
I think I remember you saying that on our show.
Oh, it's terrible. And then I did a book called Infinite Vacation. And then probably what I felt was my first book, which was the book that I did full time. Chris alluded to it earlier. It was an Odyssey with Matt Fraction. And then it's just been a roller coaster, really. Then Black Bolt, which was my first Eisner.
That's right.
And then went on from Black Bolt to do Invisible Kingdom, which would mean 2 more of my Eisners.
It hits.
Then worked with Oscar Isaac on a graphic novel called Head Wounds. And then I wrote a book called Machine Gun Wizards with Sammy Cavalli. And then I've written another book called Bloodstained Teeth with Patrick Reynolds. And Aquaman at DC. And now
Andromeda.
Andromeda,
I'll just say really quick, and I know that Christian will not say this on the show, but it's criminal. Absolutely insane to me that did not get a nom for the Eisner this year. That book is beautiful, and Ron V is an absolute master behind the typewriter, if I can just say.
It feels like a special book, and it felt like a special book when we were doing it. Hey, look, not everything. There was a lot of great books out this year, and it's not a single book that's been nominated for an Eisner that personally I wouldn't be like, that doesn't deserve it. They all deserve to be nominated, and sometimes it's just about where comics fall in the in the year and how close they are to nomination seasons. That kind of can make a difference. It's fine. It's I've got 3, and it doesn't stop it from being a good book.
There are many creators out there that will tell you that they believe that the nom is sometimes even more important than the win. So the fact that you even have 3, and that's that could all be whatever you want to believe in terms of Eisners and just award getting in general. But I think you're well worth 3. And I think you've got more on the way.
Is there any reason why the nom would be a little more important? Is it just like the recognition?
I guess I would say I was kind of debating on whether I wanted to say the actual creator, because we had Kyle Starks on the show, who we know is a very talented writer and artist as well in his own right. And he actually just included, he posted on social media not too long ago that he got new business cards that says the 3-time Eisner nominated writer artist. So that maybe he is poking fun at the idea that he hasn't gotten one yet. But I have heard the thought that just being nominated is sometimes kind of like reaching the peak. But in my opinion, you got to get that. Maybe it's the competitive part of me, like playing sports. I got to get that. I got to get that hardware. You know what I mean?
I would imagine that maybe and maybe Christian, you could chime in for your experience, but I would imagine like as a new, creator on the scene, the nomination is probably like a nod, like, hey, your work is being recognized by the right people. And that's good enough, right? Because it's so hard to get into comics and the amount of teeth cutting that you got to do. And just that nomination is probably enough to like motivate you to go that next level. right?
Man, it's huge. Like, and when anyone that knows my work, I mean, my work is not like typical comic book work. And for a long time, I kind of dealt with kind of imposter syndrome. I'm worried that, I was just kind of dabbling in it, and I was an illustrator working in comics rather than a comic artist. And so when I got that nomination for Black Bolt, which really was only my second series in many ways, despite kind of doing 2 books at Image previous to Odyssey, it was the recognition of that Eisner was huge to me. I mean, not that I was going to give up, and not that I was, I wasn't going to carry on or anything, but it just felt like, okay, I'm on my road.
There we go.
And I deserve to be on the road. And it kind of, I did a convention in London in May, and I did a panel because I used to be a school teacher, and kind of education and kind of helping people is a big part of who I think I am. And I did a panel all about overcoming imposter syndrome and trying to help people, not just artists, but kind of anyone that wants to kind of do anything really, and just trying to kind of understand where it comes from and get some tools to kind of overcome it, and talk about my own experience with it. And, a big part of me in my journey to overcome imposter syndrome kind of started when I got that Eisner nomination. And it certainly didn't go away after I won, because you then I've won this now, I have to deserve it. So it does this weird thing where you're like, I have to keep upping myself.
Yeah.
But it's it was huge for me. And there's not a day that goes by that I'm not very grateful for everyone who voted, for the committee that nominated me in the first place. And that goes for the 3 times, if I go through my whole career and I don't get nominated again, I'll be furious.
I will burn this institution to the ground, damn it.
But I'll deal with it. Yeah. I'll deal with it.
Chris,
I have no doubt.
I got one more question for Chris takes us to the main show, and it's only because you just brought up being a school teacher, which aligns to a question I had for you, because I went to your website and I wanted to get spun up on your bio and make sure I was I came correct stepping into the Spec Tales. And you have a very funny line in your bio that made me laugh out loud. I was like, I'm gonna have to ask him about this. But in your bio, it says, after 10 years of encouraging London teenagers to draw anything other than comics, Christian Ward is now a multi-Eisner-winning comic book artist, which is it's a great copy. And I was curious, I guess during those 10 years of you, trying to stray aspiring London teenage comic artists away from comics, what were you pushing them towards? If it wasn't any particular reason why you were is that serious?
I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah, hit it.
No, it was totally serious.
Okay.
And it's funny because we're going to talk about this a little bit later.
Okay.
Because there's stuff that this will tie back to, but this is a great point to kind of let us see that we'll return to. So, when you're an art educator, you have a kind of list of criteria that you have to kind of tick off from the exam board. The student must be able to do this, this, and this. And it's, in many ways, it's kind of art's such an intangible subject that it's quite hard to align assessment with that. And it as an artist, that's something you have to deal with, and you don't always necessarily agree with it, but it's your job, and you have to find a way of making it work. And like any kind of kids like drawing comics. Like drawing comics. But if you put a pile of comics into an exam board, they ain't passing. They're not going to get a grade. They're just not, because they have to show a wealth of art understanding and a wealth of kind of, there's this, and this, so it's really, it's kind of, it's obviously I was being humorous in the bio, but, there's a big part of it, going, okay, you can draw one piece of comic book art, but now I also want to see live drawing, and now I also want to see kind of some, a still life, and I want to see some abstract work, and I want to see some sculpture.
Makes sense.
So that's kind of what it is. It's about kind of having a broad,
well-rounded education. Got it.
Not just comics. And believe me, I love comics, and I used to teach a module in comics art because I was very fortunate that I was head of departments in my school, so I came up with a curriculum. So there was comics in there, but yeah, it has to be a balanced diet. That's what I would say.
Well, and I can only assume too that when you were doing this, when you were teaching people or teaching young kids about art and such, and comics being, especially, I'm guessing this is probably around the 2000s era, in that time frame. Comics were in such a weird flux of, Marvel had just almost barely, got through, and DC was kind of spinning its wheels. Like the 90s was not only the most successful time that comics had ever been, but it was also a time where it almost failed completely. Almost to the point of the Comics Code Authority during the 60s. So, during that time, do you really want to encourage young people to get into an industry that is spinning its wheels and, is already a niche medium anyway? Yeah.
I mean, like where I was teaching, it was in Bethnal Green in the East End of London. I'm a big reason why this is getting very deep and serious now, but a big reason why I left teaching wasn't just because I had this opportunity with comics, but because a lot of parents unfortunately didn't take art very seriously, and they didn't really kind of go down that route. So I probably didn't have a single child who wants to be a comic book artist. I mean, that would have been wonderful. Or maybe it wouldn't have been, because I would have been like, that's what I want to do. You're not doing it.
Well, as Badr kind of alluded to a moment ago, we're going to go and get into our normal Spec Tales happenings here. We could sit here and just pick Christian Ward's brain, and we will continue to do that. Don't worry. But let's go ahead and get into our recent pickups.
Recent pickups.
And as most spectators know by now, this is the time where we introduce the audience to what we've been reading recently, what we've been collecting here recently. And if you guys don't mind, I will go ahead and start us off here because I want to hear your guys and I want more time for you.
Take it away, Captain.
Thank you. I will be talking about Bryn Mawr #1 from IDW Publishing, writer Steve Niles and artist and colorist Damian Worm, letters by Taylor Esposito. And some of you at home listening right now may know this creative team. They're, of course, the team behind the October Fraction, which came out, was a highly successful comic book series, but eventually also got one season of television over on Netflix. And as we've seen recently, if you get a series on Netflix, unless you're Stranger Things or something else, I'm trying to think of something else that's been successful, that's got multiple seasons. You generally don't. You generally get one season on Netflix, and then they shove you into Oblivion. So not to make a pun there to the Oblivion bar, but they also are the creative team behind Monster and Mad Men and The Grieveling. I'll give you a brief synopsis here. The first issue of Bryn Mawr focuses on Mark Turner, who moves back to his hometown following a divorce, often haunted by his own demons, which includes alcoholism, being mostly an absentee father. Mark attempts to reunite with his daughter while also renovating an old church into his metaphorical or literal shelter for a new life. And then scary happenings happen during that first issue. It's a lot of setup. And I think that's really the strength of the Niles Worm team, is that while they are mostly focused on horror elements in a lot of their work, including Bryn Mawr, they do a lot of important legwork in this first issue that gets you to care about Mark. Why should we go on this journey with him? And they do a really awesome kind of like turn page teaser for what's about to come. And I'm very excited. I wish IDW would do more of this. IDW is so known for a lot of their licensed product. And I heard, we've all heard about the shakeups that have been happening at IDW here recently. I hope that in this next era of IDW publishing, they get more into what I would compare to as like Boom Studios here recently, which is a lot of creator-owned stories, stuff where they let the creator kind of go crazy. And I think that's where a lot of times you get a lot of interesting storytellings. But that is, of course, what we're talking about here with Bryn Mawr #1. And I'm excited to see where this series goes.
Yeah, that cover is like that's a powerhouse cover right there. If I had seen this at the shop, just on the cover alone, I would have picked it up for sure.
Absolutely. Christian, have you heard of this series yet? Are you familiar at all with Bryn Mawr, the team?
I am very familiar. In fact, I've done a variant cover for them, which I imagine by the time this podcast comes out, will probably out, because I think it was for issue 2. So yeah, I'm very aware of it. I also know where it's going because I've read issue 2.
Creator person.
I mean, God, Steve Niles. I mean, man,
30 Days of Night.
one of the best.
I mean,
vampire stories ever.
Right. Yeah. And speaking from a man who just demolished the vampire genre not too long ago with Bloodstained Teeth.
Smashed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve Niles and 30 Days of Night, I go back to when I first started reading comics like the way I do now. I've always been into superheroes. I've been into comic books for most of my life, but it wasn't until I got into about middle school, which would be around, sorry, I'm going to age myself a little bit here. This would be around 2015, 2016 was when I was in 7th and 8th grade. My librarian, who I owe a lot to, shout out to Robin Souter. She, one of the first books she ever bought me was 30 Days of Night.
Oh,
so,
wow, nice.
Yeah, no, and that's it means so much to me. I still own, it's actually behind me right now in my library of comics that I have that, and I also have a what is it called? You guys remember the Marvel Essentials, the black and white trades that they would put out?
Hell
back
yeah,
in the day?
I do. Those I
have an Iron Man one from when that time.
Yeah, those books are the Essentials hold a special place in my heart. But real quick, Chris, I think you might have did the opposite of age yourself. Did I hear you say you were in middle school in 2015?
Yeah, I was in high school. I was a freshman in 2017, graduated in 2010.
Okay. For a minute, I think you said you were in middle school in 2015, and I was like, Chris, you were
sorry,
as
2005. Is that right? Am I all messed up here?
Yeah, no, I think you meant 2005. I get it now.
2005. I apologize. Yeah, I'm not that young. I wish I was, but no, I am. Yeah, 2005 was when I was in middle school. 2007 was when I was in high school, and that's where like my real we're talking like Court of Owls, Batman. That's where I really started getting into that whole really reading the way I do now. So anyway, let's go on to Christian. Do you want to take us next? Do you want to see what's your recent pickup?
I will say I feel old. Can I swear on this podcast?
I think you can. Let's just do it. How about that?
I feel old as fuck now because I was like a grown up with a grown up job when you were like little. So the book I'm going to talk about is Do a Powerbomb.
Hell,
by Daniel Warren Johnson and Mike Spicer. And I will say actually before I talk about it, I've not actually read this, and that's when you're a comic book creator, you rarely read comics. I mean, I've got like a read pile next to my bed that's just embarrassing. Mm-hmm. But like like Daniel's stuff is, my God, I'm just so in awe of him. I mean, probably one of my favorite things that he's done thus far was his Dead Earth, the Wonder Woman Dead Earth.
Wonder Woman Dead Earth, yeah.
It's just incredible. So like that was the first thing I picked up. And now I buy everything that he does. Mm-hmm. And he's his storytelling. And like I say, I have read it, but I will sit as I'm doing now and just flick through it and just get lost with just like how he tells a story. And just like one thing that I've always wanted to be better at in my work is just action sequences. And like there is nobody in kind of like American comics anyway that does action sequences better than Daniel. No one. I mean, like agreed. I think Chris Samney comes close.
That's a good one.
Yeah, James Warren I think should be discussed as well.
Yeah, but they don't. I mean, is there going to be a video on this, or is it just podcast?
It's just audio, I think, but we can definitely see what you're talking about here.
But I mean that panel there. I'm just showing the panel of the kind of the girl backwards flipping into the kind of arena, the ring. I mean, and I don't like wrestling means nothing to me. Like I understand it, but I don't watch wrestling. It's not a thing that I'm into. But it's incredible to me just to sort of flick through and just like. And what I think is really cool is he can load up the page with, in my mind, too many panels, and yet it still flows, and there's still a big splash moment, and it's surrounded by like 10 panels. I'm like, how does he do that? He's a magician. He's a magician. It's amazing.
Well, welcome to the club, because I think I can speak for Badr here. I'm sure he'll have something to say about Do a Powerbomb as well. But this book in 2022 was across the board, from my view, the best comic of the year. I think if it wasn't on a list, it was definitely the top of that list. And speaking from the Oblivion Bar standpoint, both Aaron and I had it as our consensus comic book of the year. It's obviously already Eisner nominated. I would be very surprised if it doesn't win. And Daniel is one of, if not the nicest guy in the medium. And I'm speaking to one of the nicest as well here. I'm looking across from one as well. But if you're at a chance to meet Daniel Warren Johnson in person, the guy will give you all the time that he has. And I've been a fan of his since back when he was doing Extremity at Image. So it's been a journey to see him, kind of grow the way he has over the last 2 or 3 years with Beta Ray Bill. And as you had said, Wonder Woman, Dead Earth. So it's kind of incredible to see do a powerbomb, which like you had said, Christian, is a sport, if you want to call wrestling a sport. I don't care about anymore. I was, of course, part of the Attitude Era, in the 90s with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, X-Pac, what do they call it? X-Pac and Triple H and all those guys. So I was a part of that, but I haven't been into it recently. And if you know Daniel's work and if you know him as a person, he's very much still into wrestling today. So this book meant a lot to him. Shameless brag. We had Daniel on the show when Beta Ray Bill on the Oblivion bar, right before Do a Powerbomb had come out, and he had talked about it to us after we had finished the episode, and we're just talking amongst ourselves. And he had mentioned that he had just got the okay to do a creator series at Image of a wrestling book, and we were, Aaron and I being fans of Daniel, we were like, well, we'll check it out regardless. But we could never be surprised, or we could never assume that it was going to be this incredible story that we got here with Do a Powerbomb. So, Badr, is there anything you want to add to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you basically took the words out of my mouth, Chris, but I'm just going to echo some of those sentiments a little more. I had the opportunity to meet Daniel at Heroes Con a few weeks ago, and I got him to sign my copy of Do a Powerbomb, as well as with Mike Spicer has signed it at a previous convention. But I got I got the full set now, so I got both signatures. But yeah, man, to Chris's point, like Daniel's line at Heroes Con, and I've met him multiple times at Heroes Con, but it never fails. His line never fails to be like one of the more busier lines. And I think a big reason why his lines can extend, other than him just being a fantastic artist that, comic fans want to go see, is that he takes time to talk to you. And, I think his line is one that when you go in, you're going to be in there for a minute, but it's worth it. And you're never mad that other people are taking their time, because you're like, you know what, man, like he's here to share. And, everyone's getting their experience, and you're kind of happy that everyone gets to share these accolades. And, you're talking to him as like just a regular guy. Like he gave me a recommendation for a wrestling match. He was like, yo, you got to watch this Kenny Omega match versus this other cat. He had like this really fly shirt on. I complimented. He was like, oh, yo, you got to find it here and check it out. You know what I'm saying? He feels like a regular guy. But then when you see his work, you're like, where does these ideas come from? And what's so cool about being a fan, being in comics now and watching his rise is that you mentioned Extremity, and that was my first introduction, and that shit blew me away. And he has not stopped blowing me away with his bodies of work. And I like that he's obviously like for us, like, he's a name that you pick up instantly. If you know that he's coming out with a book, it's like, go ahead and put it on my pull list. I'm going to buy it. I'm probably going to get it. And you're going to get the trade too. You're going to get the single issues and then you're going to get the nice collected trade. But he is definitely a staple, I think, in any collection, and an easy recommendation too. Because, he's done so many bodies of work. You can point anyone towards his creator-owned stuff, his stuff for like, the big two. And then obviously he's got this thing with Skybound coming out, Transformers. It's like he is a chameleon. No matter where he goes, like Christian said, his talent, he really does have incredible talent. So it doesn't matter what he does or what property does or what company he's working for. His knack for incredibly heartfelt, action-packed storytelling is going to come through, and it's just going to be a good time. So,
yeah. Actually, I own, the only reason why I own Battle Chasers, which if you're speaking to any fan of comics from the 90s, they'll tell you that Battle Chasers is like an essential in your collection. But the reason why I own it now physically is because Daniel told me, again, speaking of after our conversation on the Oblivion bar, he was like, if you have not read Battle Chasers, that was such an influence for me, because we look at Daniel's art now, and it is obviously very much manga inspired, anime inspired. You can see the elements there pretty clearly. He mentioned that Battle Chasers was one of the very first books that he read as a young person that very obviously had anime inspiration behind it.
Mad Joe. It was Mad Joe, man. Like that dude was drawing manga, and like you wanted every video game also to look like a Mad Joe comic too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think that was along with Jim Lee. It was one of those styles that was very much emulated in the 90s because it was a proven method, right? And Christian, I'd like to pick your brain really quick before we move on to our Grail Tale, which I'm very excited about your pick here this week. Speaking from a creator standpoint, and someone who is obviously, like we said, has gained much success, not only recently, but just over your entire career. You've gone to a couple conventions. I actually got to meet you in person was that New York last year? That we got to officially meet. Yeah. One of my favorite pictures at any convention is you and I. We look like two happy little boys just finally getting to meet and hang out for a second. But speaking from a creator standpoint, how much do those interactions mean to you when you have someone who just comes up to you and says, "I have my Odyssey, I have my Bloodstained Teeth," and then you get. I know for some creators that can be it's hard because you are sitting at home a lot by yourself, working on your craft all the time. And then you finally get pushed out into this arena of people who have been sitting in a room by themselves, reading the stuff you've been working on. And they're just so blown away that you're there. Explain that type of interaction.
Well, I mean, earlier, I talked about how much the Eisner nomination meant to me. I would say that fan interaction is more impactful than that. And the thing, to go back to sort of like what you're saying about Daniel kind of giving everybody their time. I mean, I'm very conscious of when I'm at a comic convention that everyone that meets me gets me. For a couple of minutes, they get full interaction because I genuinely, I'm really pleased to meet any fan. Because they're paying my mortgage. So why wouldn't I be? Thank you. It's not about them coming to me and saying, "Oh, I'm a big fan" or whatever. It's also about me genuinely wanting to thank a fan because they've put their faith in me. They've regardless of whether they know me or they don't know me, they've paid their $3 to $5 to $15 to $20 to $30 to pick up a piece of my work, and I want to say thank you. And I may not say thank you, but I'll say thank you by kind of giving them some genuine time and having a chat and connecting with somebody on a real level. I mean, and sometimes somebody comes and they don't want to they just want to get a sign and they would just want to go, and that's fine too. But I love it. I love it. I mean, I've got, as I was interrupted earlier by I said she was 2, she's 3. She'll never forgive me. I've got a 3-year-old and an almost 6-year-old. So I've not done a lot of conventions in the last few years. I tend to just do 1 or 2 a year. I'm doing New York again this year for reasons. Yeah, for reasons. We know for reasons. Yeah. Which may be apparent when this podcast has come out. I love it. And I do Thought Bubble in the UK every year because that's an amazing convention for anybody who's able to get to the UK or who is in the UK. And that's on my list at some point. It's incredible. It's probably the best. It's my favorite convention of any convention I've ever been to anyway. It's brilliant. But the one thing I love about going to an American show, and I've done Heroes once, I've done Rose City, and I've done New York, and I've done San Diego. It's just an English fan can be reserved. I mean, who'd have thought that an English fan would be reserved? But an American fan is often much more open with their affection for your work, and that's just soul food. It's just I don't go to conventions to make money. I go for that, and so nothing would please me more than just people coming to sort of tell me what they think of me, and for me to be able to thank them. Absolutely. That's a good way to go about it. And someone who is often in the convention cycle, I'm very fortunate to work for a company that gets me at San Diego, New York, and basically any convention that I want to go to. I would say that some of my best interactions include Christian, include Daniel. David Mack is another good example of someone who is incredible. I don't even know how he does it, the way he interacts with his fans. There very rarely do I see an interaction with an artist and a fan where I'm like, oh, that sucked. It has happened, of course. That's going to happen. And that can happen for a multitude of reasons. It could be that the artist has had a long day. These are business. At the end of the day, they are business trips for you guys. You were there to meet editors, meet future collaborators, and also your fans as well. It could be many things, but I would say 95% of the time, and I've been to a lot of conventions, 95% of the time, it has been mostly positive, very
inspiring interactions between creator and the readers. So let's go ahead and get into we put it off long enough. Let's go ahead and get into our Grail Tale. We'll talk about Christian and his longtime affection with a very certain series.
Grail Tale.
Grail Tale.
Grail Tale. Grail Tale. Grail Tale.
Grail Tale.
All right, Christian, well, go ahead.
So the book, the series that I want to talk about, which I don't know if it was ever single issues or it was always a graphic novel. I'm not sure. Is Batman, Arkham Asylum,
Nice.
Serious House on a Serious Earth.
Yes.
And
Iconic.
this incredibly iconic.
Can I go ahead and admit right here, I might be putting my nerd card on the line, but I did not know that was its official title. I'm so used to people shortening it to Batman Arkham Asylum. I had no idea that it had a full title, Serious House on Serious Earth.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and definitely put my nerd card on the line because Arkham Asylum is a title, or it's a book that is on my list of like, why haven't you read this? You know that it's a classic.
Man.
You'll probably like it. So I'm really excited to hear, Christian, like how this has become your Grail Tale, because I need one last push.
I'm going to push you over the edge and you'll
do it.
fall into its delirious delights. This book, without any hyperbole, changed me. And if it wasn't this book didn't exist, I don't know if I'd be a comic book creator.
Wow.
Like, I genuinely don't. Now, that's not to say that I didn't want to be a comic book artist before this book hit. I did. I won a art competition when I was 15. And they did a little interview with me, this magazine that I won this art competition with, and asking me what I wanted to be. And I said right there and then, I want to be a comic book artist. And that predates this.
Wow.
So I always wanted to be that. So basically, like, I'm a huge Batman fan, and in 1989, my world was rocked when Tim Burton's Batman came out, and I saw, I was up to that point, the book that I would just flick through every day I had this book called The Greatest Batman Stories Ever Told. And it was this collection of like Batman from like kind of like the Bob Kane all the way through to kind of, Son of the Demon. And it was all, lots of 60s, lots of 70s, lots of 80s. But it was all very colourful. It was Batman in his blue with the yellow emblem,
Yep.
And I loved it. But that's all the Batman that I saw. And then when Batman 89 came out, it kind of like, to see that gothic interpretation, it just did something to my brain. It took a character that I loved and just pushed it into just pure adore. And then it was a year later that the Arkham Asylum was published in the UK, and I would have been 14, and I got it for Christmas. And it wasn't this edition that I'm holding now, this hardback edition. I don't know where the original copy was. I've got it somewhere. And for anyone that doesn't know, this was a book written by Grant Morrison and illustrated by Dave McKean. And it tells the story of Batman being lured to the asylum by the Joker, who has taken the patients and the workers of the asylum hostage. And it is the only way that I'm going to let anyone go is if Batman comes and spends a night with us. And that's the story. Batman comes and he spends a night in the asylum with the lunatics. And it's unlike any other Batman story before, and I would say even since, because narratively, it's very lyrical. It's much more about mood and the emotional feeling you get rather than what happens. And it's very psychological. And I remember just reading it, just being blown away by just the psychology of it, the darkness of it, and just, but also more than anything, the artwork by Mr. McKean, which is the combination of painted art, photography, sketching, abstraction, just like every page is a literal masterpiece. And I always remember I was bought this by my parents at the time. And it was, late 80s, early 90s. And the word graphic novel had kind of just been coined. Didn't really exist before then. It was being bounded around. And it was a way of kind of booksellers to sell this new, collected comic books. And I always remember my mom said to me that she didn't understand what a graphic novel was until they bought me this book. And it was when they understood how important it was, and that it was this object of art and just something to treasure. And it literally changed my life. Wow. And I did years later, not that many years later, when I was studying my A-levels, which is something that you do. Oh no, they weren't A-levels. When I was doing my GCSEs, which is something you do when you're 16 in the UK, I was doing a GCSE in art, and you had to write a kind of like a dissertation of sorts, but obviously a dissertation for a 16-year-old, and it had to be about an artist. And my art teacher at the time, Mr. Bowen, hated comic book art, and it's all I wanted to do. We're calling right back to what I said at the start. I just wanted to be a comic book artist, and I would do drawings of comic book, and he would be like, "No, you've got to do some still life. You've got to do some live drawing. You've got to do all the things that I would later say myself as an art teacher." But I remember I had to do this dissertation on an artist, and I wanted to do it on this book. Mm-hmm. And he was a bit like, and I had to really convince him that this book was going to do it. And I did this dissertation, and I talked about how important this book was and how this book was art. It wasn't just comic book art. It transcended that categorization, and it alluded kind of to fine art. And I did so well. I wasn't a very academic pupil, but I did so well with this dissertation that the exam board kept it as an example of how to write a dissertation. Such was my passion for it that it kind of overrided any kind of inability that I had to sort of work in an academic way. This book just, it is so important to me, and the way that I approach. Even though I'm a digital artist and I'm not like kind of a multimedia artist who paints and stuff, it's never far from my inspirational pile whenever I want to kind of create something that kind of is able to, that I want to sort of trigger emotions, that I want to kind of like give the reader a kind of visceral, unexplained feeling when they're reading it, because it's all kind of the storytelling isn't just about kind of what happens, but also how it makes you feel. It's just a wonderful book, just incredible.
I think that's the biggest takeaway. I think the way you would kind of brought out the story and how you say it's like it kind of bleeds between the medium and becomes at some point, different points, most of the time, fine art. I think the ultimate takeaway from Arkham Asylum from my end is that it feels like this book can't exist today. There's just too much time that had to have gone into this, I feel, for this to be put out, unless it is like, say, a Black Label book, for instance. Like they would have to solicit this a year out for something like this to exist. And a big part of reading Arkham Asylum is that once he does go into Arkham, you are in the head of Batman. You are experiencing all of this through his POV. And when he interacts with different villains throughout the book, the mood changes so significantly. I mean, the way that the Joker looks in this book is unlike any other version that you've ever seen of the Joker. I think that's probably the most damning, example, right?
He's terrifying.
And yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most, there's often that line with the Joker. Is he human or is he not? I think in this story, he is more than human in a lot of different ways, spiritually and otherwise. So I love the fact that you go back to Arkham Asylum, that it had such a big impact in your life, because it is one of those books that is often recommended to Batman fans. I mean, Batman, he gets a lot of flack in 2023 because DC knows what they have with the character, and therefore they often go back to the well when it comes to, okay, what do we need to sell this week? Oh, let's put a Batman book out, And if you look behind me, this whole first shelf, and this is my DC bookshelf, this is all Batman. You know what I mean? So I have a full shelf of Batman. There's a reason for it, because the guy has had a multitude of incredible stories.
And he's so versatile. But one thing I just want to, I'm going to contradict you a little bit with my take on the book. You talked about how we're inside Batman's head. I don't believe we are. Okay. I believe we're inside the head of the asylum. And for me, the Arkham Asylum is a living, breathing thing, and they're all in its head. And so it becomes like this idea of kind of fictions moving through this world of madness for this mind. And so, and when we read it, we're also in that head. And so we're kind of like, we're with Batman trapped in this head of madness. It's just like, oh my God, it's just.
Well, just Christian, incredible. As a 3-time Eisner winner, I'm apt to default to your interpretation over mine.
I'll break this tiebreaker. I'll break this tiebreaker tonight. I'll read it tonight and tell you which one of you is right. Right?
Yes, thank you, Badr. Yes.
But isn't that what art is? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and isn't that what stories is? To be able to,
it's one of the best parts of the medium.
Yeah,
it's that interpretation is everything.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yep.
Christian, do you have your original copy? Like, do you have the original copy your parents bought you?
It's somewhere. It's somewhere. I've moved like 3-4 times. But it's. I hope I have it, because weirdly I had a little look to see if I could find it. I mean, it wouldn't be the American edition. It was the Titan UK, which is who used to publish all the DC.
How much different is that one? But because it sounds like you probably have bought this graphic novel a few times. How many times in total do you think?
I've got it 3 times.
Oh wow!
But this is the 15th anniversary.
Okay.
The best one is I got recently, which came out a couple of years ago, is the big slipcase edition, where
the absolute.
Where they went back and they reworked Dave McKean's artwork, and it's like night and day. Some of the pages, it's incredible. But I've been very fortunate in my career that I've actually got to work with Karen, who is Karen Berger, who is the editor on this book, and also with Richard Brunning. Yeah, absolutely. But also with Richard Brunning, who was the designer on the book, and he was just sort of saying to me, just like, what an absolute nightmare it was to make. Not obviously not because of working with Grant and McKean, but because it was just so. It was just like unlike anything that had been done, and it was a real trial and error trying to kind of find the best way to photograph the work, because a lot of this work, it's like photographs and models, and like some of them are like huge 3D dioramas. How do you take that and repurpose it for a comic page?
Wow.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Read
it.
That is obviously, if you're listening to this right now, if you have not, be like Badr, go buy it tonight, go read it. It's an all-time classic. It is something worth pondering. I will say that. That'll be kind of the final thing that I say, is that if you buy the book, it'll be something that will stick with you, and it's a book that's worth discussing. It's a book that it's a very easy book club book, where like you had just heard between Christian and I, there's different interpretations, and I jokingly say that I would default to his opinion, but in reality, it's the medium is better when there's different interpretations of work. You can discuss things. People take different things away from different titles. So definitely check out Arkham Asylum. I highly recommend that as well from my end. And while we're on the Grail Tale segment, I wanted to briefly say that from our Skrull hosts, Jake and Jesus, they want to eventually have Badr on the show. So Badr is not going to share his Grail Tale today with us while we're taking over the show. I will do a quick one because I've already been on the show and I don't want to spend as much time, but I just want to talk about something that I know that Christian will appreciate and I know Badr will as well. I have Resident Evil #1, which is a Bill Sienkiewicz cover from back in the day. And the only way you could get this comic was if you went to Toys R Us and bought the comic at the Resident Evil Capcom events. And when I was a kid, I was a huge Resident Evil fan growing up. I love 1, 2, 3, 4. The series starts to fall off a little bit at 5. Then it gets better in Village. Like, I've been through the weeds when it comes to the franchise. And Resident Evil 2 to this day is one of my favorite games of all time. But this comic means so much to me. And, let's see here. So we've got, I'm trying to see we've got Church, Kramer, Shaheen, and Sadok's story. So it's like an anthology with Dave Johnson on art throughout the entire thing, which is kind of cool. And then, of course, the iconic Bill Sienkiewicz cover. Again, this was free at the event. If you went to the event back in the day in 96, you got this comic for free. So I have it graded at a 9.2. And I know Jake and Jesus often talk about, comics and collecting and like, what's the value in graded comics? I'm kind of in the middle with that. I think it's fun to immortalize comics like this, comics that you got back in the day and that you want to keep kind of preserved. So Resident Evil 1. If you haven't seen the cover, definitely check it out. The comic
so badass. Like, this is like I am a sucker for promotional comics like this that are like obscure, tied into like video game or property. And this cover, doesn't look anything like Bill Sienkiewicz work that I'd imagined. But now that you say it, I see it, and it is trippy. There is a giant eyeball. There looks like tarantulas. Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's really special. And I think for any Resident Evil fan, whether it's just for video games, I was about to say the comic itself is not great. It is a promo comic from the 90s. So it's not incredible. Comics are hard to make, of course. But I think even back in the day when I read it, I was like, I would think I would rather just play the video game personally. But it is still very special to me, mostly because of getting it in the moment. So if you guys don't have anything to add, we'll go ahead and lean into our very last segment, which of course
actually, wait, hold on,
speculation.
Chris, I do have a story I would like to share on the topic of Resident Evil because it's applicable.
Okay.
And
okay.
So my I'm the oldest boy of 5 in total, and we're all into video games. But the next oldest, his name is Joe. My brother Joseph is a huge video game fan. He will play all games. He'll beat them in a day, and then he'll play the ultra hard setting. And so he's always like putting me on to video games. He's always like, B, you got to get this game, be on the lookout for this one. And Resident Evil 4 remake, the one that just came out like this year.
Yes.
He was giving me the forewarning like months in advance. B, Resident Evil 4. I'm telling you, it's going to be the best like game out there. I'm telling you. So the game comes out. He beats it in like a week. He's like, B, it's the best game I've ever played. It's the perfect remake. You got to check it out. I had just beaten like God of War, and I was looking for a game to play. And about a month later, I finally had a chance to like sit down, and I was like, okay, let me like check out this game. All right. I'm not the biggest horror game fan. If it's a horror game, I'm a little iffy about it because horror is not my favorite genre. So I decided to download there was a demo for it that came out months before the game came out. I played the demo. I did terrible at it. And I texted him and I said, Joe, this game is way too scary. And if it's anything like if the demo is too scary for me, I cannot play this full game. And he was like, oh, I forgot to mention it gets really messed up. So Resident Evil is something I admire from afar.
Yeah, it is definitely one of those franchises that 4 is considered by many to be probably the best in the franchise. And when they remade it, of course, it was very highly coveted by many people. And I can stand here and side with your brother here that it is incredible. It is kind of like the definition of survival horror. So if you've been into Silent Hill, or there's many games or comics in that genre, Resident Evil has always kind of been like the poster child for the genre. And when they started to get away from that, which I kind of briefly hinted at a moment ago with like Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6, it was becoming more of like an action game. It felt more like Die Hard than survival horror. That's where it started to lull. And then when it went back to Village, which is like almost a first person, you're in the POV of the main character. It's all first person and all that, which is away from the normal game, which is usually third person. It brought it back to its survival horror roots. And it's been incredible since. I mean, they've remade 2, 3, and now 4. And they've all been really incredible games, for modern, players of the Resident Evil franchise. So without further ado, though, let's go ahead and continue on with the Spec Tales of it all and get into our speculation. We love the drops.
Oh, man, that was
Jake and
great.
Jesus, I know everyone listening to this right now, you guys should know that we were very tickled by these drops. Obviously, I've been listening to Spec Tales for a long time.
Their
And
drop
they-
for speculation is exactly how I hear speculate. When you hear the word speculation, that's the vibe you get. Someone whispering it, all weird.
Well, and for everyone at home, this is, of course, a quick segment where we go around the room and discuss a comic or collectible that we feel is undervalued and we think we should bring up to the audience. So, Badr, I would love to start with you. I know we had talked a little bit before the show. You had mentioned that you're not generally into the spec market, which I totally respect. And honestly, I envy you because I hate the fact that I'm basically a slave to spec in general. But go ahead and talk about what you feel is undervalued and something you think the listeners should check out.
I'm gonna give my best. I'm gonna give my best try at it. Or I'm gonna give a college level try at this, and maybe just more reflective of my personal taste versus like the market in general. But I feel like with the recent passing of the legendary John Romita Sr., I would not be surprised if there is a slight bump in prices or people seeking out his Spider-Man comics. We're just getting off. We're still kind of riding the wave and fandom for Across the Spider-Verse. I feel like just Spider-Man, things in general, merch, comics, toys, etc., are hot right now. And it is a little sad. It is actually really sad that we lost one of the most legendary Spider-Man artists ever. So so shortly after praising and falling in love with the Spider-Man lore and character so soon. So I'm going to go ahead and give a nod to Romita's Spider-Man legacy, and because we're actually recording an episode spotlighting and giving praise to Romita Sr. and kind of celebrating his career. So I've lately just been reading his biography and just kind of getting spun up with his career in general, and it's remarkable to realize how many characters, beloved characters that he's had a hand in. He's credited as a co-creator for like Wolverine, Punisher, and I think a lot of that stems from like just the costume design. He gets some of that credit, but I mean, you also think about like his Spider-Man characters as well. And during his run as artist, he was introducing characters like, I believe, the Rhino, but most definitely Mary Jane, which leads me to my first spec tale, which would be Amazing Spider-Man number 42, which is the first full appearance of Mary Jane. Obviously, her first appearance was actually in issue 25, but she didn't have a full appearance. She was always kind of behind a plant or something, and they just alluded to her. But it was in issue 42 where we got the infamous face a tiger, you hit the jackpot. I think about that as a very iconic moment in Spider-Man comics. I'm also thinking like Amazing Spider-Man 121, the night that Gwen Stacy died, and that famous cover as well. When you consider all the iconic Spider-Man covers and moments that we as comic fans kind of gravitate towards or can recall on, at the drop of a dime, I think it's not far-fetched to think that Romita Sr., a lot of it ties back to the Romita Senior era of Spider-Man. So I'm telling you, man, like his bibliography is just filled. Just Spider-Man bibliography is just filled with the hits. The death of Gwen Stacy, the introduction of Mary Jane, Daredevil issue 6 actually, because he's got his start cutting his teeth in a major way with the Daredevil series back in the day. And issue 6 of Daredevil is the first crossover between I guess it's not the first crossover, but it's the first time he drew Daredevil and Spider-Man together in a very more modern time. So just any of those kind of iconic Romita Senior era Spider-Mans. I feel like the death of Gwen Stacy and that whole 2-issue run is always like kind of a hot book, but I can see it just continuing to rise since the passing of him. And just imagine any signed Romita Senior copies of those iconic books, right?
Gosh.
Like those prices went up. So I feel like that'll be my my submission for Spec Tales. Anything Romita Senior Spider-Man, but especially those iconic Spider-Man issues.
Yeah, I mean Romita Senior, one of the the starting of the bullpen. They always talk about the Marvel bullpen, and it feels like those guys are slowly but surely starting to pass, and it sucks. It's not a good deal. Those early days of Marvel and DC, we just lost Dennis O'Neil not too long ago, Neil Adams, Like it seems like all of those guys are slowly starting to go, and it's not. Their work will obviously live on forever. They're legends, and they've been legends for a long time. But Romita passing, you've obviously still got Romita Jr. still working today, and actually is on Spider-Man currently. So he's carrying the legacy in some way for his father. He has a legacy of his own anyway. But absolutely, that's a good way to go about it. And we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording in terms of how the first 20 to 30 issues of Spider-Man have slowly but surely just become unobtainable at any grade. Back in the day, you could find some cheaper copies of like the first 20 or 30 issues for less than $100. And nowadays you're spending around $500 for even like a crappy copy of one of those first 30 issues. So it is getting a little out of hand. And I'm sure that, as Badr just said, with the passing of John Romita Sr., those will only go up in value. And I think that's a safe bet in the speculation world. They always say, always buy the originals and buy Spider-Man. That's what they always say. No matter whatever you're collecting, Spider-Man will never lose value. You know what I mean?
Spider-Man's kind of like how I treat Nintendo, specifically Pokemon games. Pokemon and Nintendo games are better than any stock you could buy. Because if there's one thing that will not depreciate in value, is Nintendo games and Pokemon. And I feel the same way with Spider-Man in terms of comics. Like you cannot go wrong getting, something iconic or a first appearance that involves a Spider-Man, any supporting character or whatnot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Christian, I would love to hear your speculation. And this is mostly because being a creator, we all know that a lot of times you don't have the time to get into the spec market or even read a lot of modern comics. I love the fact that you picked out Do a Powerbomb, which is a very recent comic. But I'm curious, what would you like to tell the listeners today on what they should be looking out for in the spec market?
Well, it's weird because, like as you say, Chris, like I come from it from a completely different point of view, and like every week, my wife is tearing her hair out because there'll be a knock at the door multiple times a week, and there'll be a box from different publishers with my comps. And anyone that follows me knows I'm a prolific cover artist. Like I love.
If you got a favorite series, Christian has done a cover for that series. I'm telling you.
Do you know I counted how many covers I've done this year?
How many?
We're at 40.
Oh my gosh, we're barely the halfway point.
40. Like I love doing covers. Like it's
like
really
you
weird,
and Peach Momoko are going head to head on who could do the most.
Yeah, I'll take her. I mean, I'll do a cover, like kind of like how people do like kind of cool downs. Like I'll do a cover. Like pages are hard work for me because it's all about kind of storytelling and mood and everything I talked about with Arkham Asylum, just getting that right. But a cover is just like instinctive and boom and just like I know what I'm doing. So I get all these covers and. And every kind of 6 months or so, I'll literally hire a skip. It'll sit on the driveway, and I will get the boxes. I'll open the boxes up. I'll throw like 10 copies in, keep 2 copies. We don't have any local comic book stores or like I try and kind of give away as many as I can so that they go into someone's hands, but a lot go to the recycle center. And every now and again, I'll just check eBay. Just to sort of see, just to make sure I'm not throwing anything that's worth anything away. And more often than not, I'm not. I mean, there might be a cover that might be like $40, $50, that sort of thing. But like nothing any higher than that. And then a couple of years ago, I got a cover. I did a cover, and I checked it on eBay as I was doing my clear out, and it was like $600. I was like, whoa. Hang on a minute. What? And it was for Something is Killing the Children. And everyone out there that collects comics is like, yeah, duh. But like for me, it's just like it kind of blew my mind a little bit. And like I've known James Tinian for long before I did that cover. And
that's issue 9, by the way, for everyone listening. Issue 9 of Something. Yeah.
And so my spec thing is anything by James, seemingly.
Can't go wrong there.
But it just the idea that it kind of just opened my eyes to kind of not just a speculative market, but also just like create our own books and books that are the hot books, the books that somehow just hit, there's loads of great books out there, but then every now and again, there's a great book that just hits that zeitgeist and becomes something more. And somehow James has multiples of these. Not once, like every time he does a Grey Worm book, it's this zeitgeist, like, oh my God, so it's
World Tree recently has gotten a lot of love. Yeah.
Incredible. And it's just, I find that really fascinating, and just really wonderful and really exciting. Not least because I'm now working with James.
I was going to say, this would be a great time for you to talk about what you're doing here recently with Distillery.
So I'm me and James are doing a book with Distillery, the new publisher setup that's doing some exciting stuff. And we're going to be doing a book that's just been announced called Spectrograph. It's going to be out next year. There's a teaser of it in a book that's coming out in August, which is like an anthology collection. It's funny because me and James have been talking about Spectrograph for I think about 2.5 years, and obviously I've been busy. You may have noticed James has also been busy writing every book there is, and it's taken us till now to kind of find the synchronicity in our kind of schedules to be able to do it, and it's really good. I'm really excited about it.
Very excited as well.
And I think it's going to be, I don't know whether it's going to have the same sort of speculation, but I hope so, because that would be nice for me. But it's
just don't throw them away, Christian. Can I ask you a favor really quick? From now on, just put your comps to the side and send them to Badr and I, because we will take those comps.
I will send them to you. Yeah,
we know postage is expensive to ship to the UK to the Midwest, but we get it. But I will pay for shipping if it means that I get some of your comps there. But that's incredible. And I'll speak for myself here when I say that everything that Distillery has been teasing, I mean, the all-star cast that they've put together is insane. Yeah. And I love the idea behind Distillery as well, which is kind of like a new age image. I don't know if people are familiar with Distillery, but it basically just puts the power in the creator's hands, not only with owning the property, but also when you sell, Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And variants, merchandise, it's going to be accessible for readers, but if you want that extra stuff, right? If you want those variants, if you want that, you have the opportunity, and it all goes to the creators, which is incredible. Yeah. It's really great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to go into my speculation, which is of course talking about, I think a lot of people listening right now, if you're familiar with, we've talked about Spider-Man already with Badr's selection. Let's go ahead and keep that train rolling with something that's been picking up a lot of heat recently. Spider-Man number 7. This is the first appearance of Bailey Briggs, aka Spider-Boy. And that series, of course, is written by Dan Slott and drawn by Mark Bagley. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because issue 7 not only has a normal A cover, B cover, C cover, but it also has a secret spoiler variant, which I'm holding right now up to the camera so they can see, that Christian and Badr can see. This is the Humberto Ramos spoiler variant, which they put out on previews months beforehand. And people were wondering, what is this? What is Dan Slott doing here with this series? And why is there a spoiler variant? Every once in a while you see those in previews, and a lot of times they just kind of go by the wayside. Nothing really happens from that. But people were excited because it's, Dan Slott is known for a lot of things, but specifically he's known for introducing new characters. He loves premiering new characters in his stories. And when that came out, a lot of people bought in on that. And it worked out because Spider-Boy is insanely hot right now. Because not only does that issue 7 of Spider-Man have those 4 covers or 5 covers, maybe. Probably there's a lot of like retailer incentive covers as well. But there's also a second printing and a virgin variant for the spoiler variant. It's just, these variants are getting insane, by the way. I'm talking to one of the most, I'm looking at one of the most prolific variant cover artists of all time. And I'm telling you right now, the variant market is getting insane. There's too many. But it is, I'm telling everyone right now, if you're listening, they just recently announced that Dan Slott and artist Paco Mendia will be writing a Spider-Boy solo series with cover artist Humberto Ramos returning. So if you have not gotten your if you've not gotten your mittens on the Spider-Man number 7 yet, go to eBay, pay the $40 now, because I guarantee you this will be $100+ book a year from now.
So Chris,
Okay.
I actually took your advice in the past for this episode, right? I was like, for once, I'm actually ahead of the curve when it comes to like trends. And I went to the shop because I was like kind of curious about the Spider-Boy. The covers look really cool. I didn't know that any of the creative team attached, but I went and picked up this cover right here. So, and then, Edge of Spider-Verse number 3. And I thought these were two different books. I guess this is not his first appearance. This is his first solo adventure. So I still need to go pick up Spider-Man 7. I actually hit up my shop after I left. I was like, damn, dude, I forgot. I meant to go pick up the first appearance. And he was like, all I've got is second prints. And I'm from a time in collecting comics where second printing was just a dirty word. I've learned now to love and enjoy and appreciate second printing for what they, I just learned to appreciate them. But my local comic shop, being Gotham City Limit here in Jacksonville, Florida, had an exclusive like Tyler Kirkham Gotham City Limit exclusive. I guess there's only like I don't know why his numbering. There's only 667 copies when it comes to these things. Yeah. I was like, oh, all right, Ben. Coolio. So yeah, man, I've tried to get ahead on the curve on this one. We're actually going to do a giveaway for one of these Gotham City Limit exclusives on the podcast. Incredible.
Well,
later,
we were just saying, this is the time to invest in Spider-Boy, because while we may not be ahead of the curve while you're listening to this right now, the curve was you're going to pay a little bit out of pocket, well behind, of course, far more than cover price. But this is, I think, a character worth investing in because the popularity, it kind of is very reminiscent of Spider-Gwen. Like, it feels very similar to that because Spider-Gwen was heavily teased when it was the first Edge of Spider-Verse solo series. She was number 2, Edge of Spider-Verse number 2. And that was highly, speculated there was going to be some new appearances in the series. You got a solo series from, why am I spacing? Who does Nick Cage play in Into the Spider-Verse? Noir. Yeah, there was a Spider-Man Noir series. There was a Spider-Gwen. There was a SPDR series in that Edge of Spider-Verse, but that cover eventually went wild. The Edge of Spider-Verse number 2. So, I
was telling, on the topic of Spider-Gwen, I was telling my buddy that I remember being in the shop when Edge of Into the Spider-Verse came out and all those spin-off books dropped. And I want to say the only book that I really ended up collecting, because there were just so many, was Spider-Gwen. And had I known that, her popularity would be what it is today, I probably would have held on to those books
one of my favorite
tighter.
It's one of my most disheartening stories, but it's one of my favorite to tell, is that when the week of Edge of Spider-Verse came out, I bought the first cover, the cover A that everyone probably is thinking of right now. But I also bought the 1 in 50 Greg Land cover, which I will be the first to tell everyone here live on the show. I'm not afraid to admit this. Not a giant Greg Land fan, I'll be honest. But I bought it because of the series, okay? And it's the cover where she's like kind of leaning down on one knee and kind of turned to the side with the mask in her hand. I bought it for $40.
I remember that.
Off the rack. And that next week, there was a stand-up of Spider-Gwen. There was second and third printings. Like, this character blew up overnight. And that 1 in 50 went from $40 to like $300 overnight. And I eventually got it graded at a 9.8, and I eventually sold it for $1,000. Please, for the love of God, everybody. Well, I say that
Big Bang Chris hacking the
I made
Chris hacking the system hacker.
But do me a favor, everyone listening right now, just go to eBay and look up Edge of Spider-Verse number 2 Greg Land variant. It will make you hurt for me because it's worth far more than $1,000 now because of Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse.
Dude, man, I remember this freaking cover, man. Can I go ahead and say on the topic of Greg Land, I know that he is wow.
Will you tell people what you're looking at right now?
Sorry, I'm all over the place. But I'm seeing so I just quickly Googled it. I'm on gocollect.com and it's saying that a 9.6
FNB.
What does FMB stand for, Chris? Fair market value, right? They've got one listed at 3,900. I don't know if that's sold or not, but 3,900. 1 year average is about 35. We'll call it 3,600, and the 90-day average is $4,000.
9.6, or I have a 9.8. And at the time, whenever I had gotten mine graded from CGC, there were only 6 in existence. 9.8 Greg Land variants of in this. Oh man, it's not bad.
This is actually a pretty good Greg Land cover. Yeah. No. I'm gonna say in my like younger years and first collecting and having my own pull list, I was a sucker for Greg Land. Like there was something about that photorealism. I guess because I'm such a huge Alex Ross fan, I swayed towards photorealism in those younger days. Obviously, I ended up growing up and learning a lot more about Greg Land and where some
Christian is biting his lip right now.
But yeah. But what I would say is that this cover is pretty decent, and it's pretty funny that comic books really just comes. It's a freaking cycle, dude. We're here talking about Edge of Spider-Verse 2 being Gwen Stacy. Spider-Gwen's first appearance. And we're here talking about the speculation about yet another Edge of Spider-Verse book.
We're in a loop.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, I feel like, we are. And the loop at this point is my years of working in a shop. Like this was when I was always at a shop. I might have just finished working at the shop. Like I might have just come off like working at the shop. Like all of the things that I was going in the shop and experiencing live, like Secret Invasion and Cross the Spider-Verse in that era, is all coming back around. Like literally, there's another Secret Invasion book by Marvel. There's Civil War has been done twice so far. You know what I'm saying? Like Secret Wars, and it's really cool to see the loop come back.
Don't even get started on the crisis
that I grew up in.
How many crises have we dealt with? We just got done with Dark Crisis not too long ago with Joshua Williamson. But and you know,
it really is cyclical, man.
And you know what? We're gonna buy them. We are gonna buy those comics because they are more times than not very awesome.
Oh yeah. Look, the big two hasn't changed much, and neither has its collectors like myself. I haven't changed myself. I'm like, I know all your tricks, but
like
I
looking at your dog.
Fall for
You're so cute, but I know you got into something, but I'm still gonna I'm gonna still love you. I'm still gonna You're aware of the tricks. You just still fall for it every time. All right. Well, I think.
Yeah. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me thrice. Yeah. All right, we need to stop.
That's actually that kind of brings. We could talk about the foil covers. Remember the foil covers and the embossed covers? Those were big in the '90s. Now the foil covers are making their appearance again. Gosh. Okay. Anyway, everybody, we're going to get off our speculation. Yeah. We're going to head out of the Spec Tales, and I will start us off here by saying thank you so much to Jake and Jesus for letting us be their Skrull imposters for this episode. It has been an honor to be a special co-host of the Spec Tales. I'm a big fan of the show. I'm a big fan of Jake and Jesus as individuals and as friends. I am a proud patron of the Spec Tales, and I'm a proud listener each Wednesday. Whenever they get back to eventually recording again, I'm glad that Badr, myself, and Christian could fill in this week for the Spec Tales, and they will be back.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to the fans for putting up with us for this episode. Hijacking their show, their beloved show, and
absolutely
trying our best. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed
episode with Badr, myself, and Christian. I will say, please check out the Oblivion Bar, a nerd culture podcast. We're on all the things. We do creator interviews. We're actually going to have Patton Oswalt and Jordan Blum on the show next week, which at this time, as you're listening to this, which I think this is supposed to come out at the end of July at some point, that episode had already come out. So please join us over at the Oblivion Bar. Badr, I will hand off the baton to you to talk about the short box really quickly one last time before we head out of here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you want to see me at my best, okay? All right, not taking over a show that has set the bar very high. If you want to check me out on my own show, check out the Short Box, a comic book talk show. Like I said, we've been doing it for over 11 years now. So I guarantee we actually have a money back guarantee on this show. That if you can't find one episode of the almost 400 episodes that we've put out, if you can't find one that you enjoy, we will absolutely give you your money. No matter of fact, we not only give you your money back, we give you double your money back. Best part of that is
the
show is free, so it's a win-win. But yeah, check out the Short Box podcast if you enjoy comic book conversations like this. If you want to hear interviews from some of the best creators in the industry, I invite you to come hang out with the Short Box
and
Nation,
I will also say the caveat that I am also a proud patron of the Short Box. I envy Badr and his ability, not only in his interviewing skills, but just the Short Box in general. I'm gonna praise him a little bit. I'm a big fan of both the Spec Tales and the Short Box. And when Jake came to me and said, "Hey, we want to have you host one of the episodes of Spec Tales," my very first thought was, I got to get Badr on the show with me to help host this show. So, and it's been a lot of fun. And I think we would be horribly mismanaged if we did not give the ultimate thanks to our special guest today, Christian Ward. Again,
Oh.
3-time. Yeah, we got to give him some more
Well,
claps here.
Man, he gets another one. He gets another one. Damn it.
Christian, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here. And we
You've
would
been
love for
fantastic.
you to just kind of one more time, kind of give the people, how can they follow you? How can they follow your career? And what do you have in the works coming up here in the near future?
I've got, well, it may have been announced by now. I'm not quite sure, but my dream book has either just been announced or is going to be announced.
I have no idea what it is. No clue.
No clue.
Who knows?
No clue.
No-
my dream
no one
book.
knows.
But people may know. And they'll be like, it's this.
It's the
But if anyone that's followed
and the
me on Twitter for the last, 4 years, which I'm at CJ Ward Arts, if you want to follow me now, on the Hell site, will not be surprised what my dream book is.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
You may even come back to this conversation at some point and look back and go, wow,
Yeah.
pretty good. Pretty good stuff.
Pretty good.
Awesome. Well, like we said, Jake and Jesus will be back. I think we are the third of the 3-part Secret Invasion event for the Spec Tales. So you should be hearing Jake and Jesus' voice next time you listen to Spec Tales. But from myself, Chris Hacker of the Oblivion Bar, my good friend and very talented co-host this episode, Badr Milligan of the Short Box, and one of the best working comic creators in the world, Christian Ward. We thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Spec Tales, and we will see you over on our individual shows. Thank you, everybody. Peace out.
Hey.
There we go. Peace.